Hello, everyone. This is Alex, and today we start with a new episode of the Commission Corner. Today we have a guest from Portugal with us. Nico, very nice to have you today.
Very nice to be here, guys.
All right, Nico, you're currently a RevOps Manager at TheyDo, but I don't want to give a lot of information to the listeners, but because it's your task now. So, Nico, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you currently do?
Yeah, sure. So actually, I started my career as an investor. I come from like the finance side of things, and I have always been involved with B2B software startups since the beginning. So I started actually working in Barcelona for a fund, and then I moved to Lisbon to work for an American growth equity. So going from like early to like later stage investments, but always focused in Europe and the US. And then 2 years and a half ago, I made the jump to the other side of the table and decided to join the operators team. And really, wanted to see scale from the inside. So I joined TheyDo to help them initially with finance as a finance manager, and then I actually moved to RevOps internally because something that I wanted to try and kind of break away from finance, which had been my trade. So yeah, that's kind of the short story, and that's where I am right now.
Do you have a preferred side, the investor side or the scale side?
To be honest, I mean, I think if you ask me now, I'll probably say the operator side, the startup side. But I do enjoy doing both, and like I feel like it's something that I want to continue sort of being involved with on both sides as I go forward in my career. So I'm doing like a little bit micro angel investing here and there. I'm kind of try to stay on top of the markets and kind of see what's happening. So I enjoy both, but I think the learning curve and the challenge you find in a startup is just unique and in a way more exciting. I would say I like that more a little bit.
Exactly. And I think also if it comes to RevOps, it's not only operational, but it can also be very strategic, right?
Yeah, exactly. Actually, it's a bit of a hot topic. I just wrote a blog post about it, like literally an hour ago. But yeah, it's interesting to see kind of like where RevOps will evolve with AI and everything that's happening, because obviously the operations part of things, which has traditionally been kind of just making everyone more efficient and reducing admin time, right? That's something that, if done correctly, can be tackled mostly by agents, right? And a little human enablement. So I think I hope that the evolution of RevOps as a function is going to be more towards strategy than it's going to be towards operations. And I actually like to use the term revenue strategy in terms of revenue instead of revenue operations. So hopefully that will pick up. But yeah, I'm aligned with you. I think that's really the more valuable side of the equation.
And to maybe elaborate on that, to yield revenue strategy, do you need automation in operation, or what's the fundamental to yield revenue strategy?
I mean, I think it really varies from organization to organization from what I've seen. But I think you need a certain like key amount of things that need to be there. The first one I think is you need the right place in the organization so that you can sort of cross-functionally talk to sales, marketing, customer success, product. You have to be in the center of all that strategic function to like really become a valuable player. So that's like number one. Then in terms of like the day-to-day, yeah, of course, I think the more you can automate operations, the more your data is in a good place, and the easier it is to consume that data like democratically, let's say within the organization. Then the more you can focus on the actual big picture stuff, right? So like if you have the day-to-day sort of running correctly and autopilot, let's say, then you can really focus on, hey, let's actually look at what the data says, and then let's have the conversation around kind of what we can tweak to make things better, right? So I think in that sense, AI and just automation in general, workflow automation has unlocked that part of the function, which I think is a more interesting one.
Mm-hmm. And when you joined as a RevOps person, was it already something that you had in mind, or is this just a very recent thought that came up since, let's say the AI revolution?
No, I mean it wasn't just like AI came and I was like, I want to do RevOps, right? But I think it was a natural evolution for me. I mean, I think like again, like the titles can vary a lot depending on every company, and some people can be almost like a chief of staff. You can be a strategy and ops manager. You can be a revenue strategy operator. You can be a RevOps lead. Like it really depends on kind of how you structure things, and it's really just a matter of naming conventions, really. But what I wanted to do from like, well, the reason for the move was really just more about, hey, I want to be more involved, particularly in strategy, because I come from numbers and I understand numbers and data, and I love to interpret that to like make decisions, which is obviously very financially ingrained. But also like there's a step further or above, if you will, that involves like, hey, how do we take this to the commercial strategy, to like making things happen, and obviously all the systems and supporting functions that need to sort of collaborate to make that happen. So I think it was a natural next step for what I was inclined to, and I think I hope it's a great sort of entry step towards the broader founder mentality, right? I think.
Nico, can you maybe tell us a bit more about the company you're currently with and also the customers that the company is here, trying to sell to?
Yeah, for sure. So TheyDo, we're basically customer journey management software. We basically focus on aligning the front, let's say the front end or the front office client experience with the back office or the back end operational implications of a company. The idea is to kind of align those things together, so everything you do as a company and the way you align your resources and the way you define your strategy ultimately caters to and responds to the wants or the needs of the customers to make sure the experience is the best. So it's a bit of a paradigm shift into the way companies want to operate. Journey first, we call it. So it's about process and kind of breaking the silos and putting everything together, rather than every department running their own strategic KPI goal or whatever, and then hoping that it all comes together at the end. So that's what we do. And in terms of customers, we focus mostly on I would say big enterprise, Fortune 100, Fortune 200 sort of company size, and we're selling across Europe and the US, all the main markets, I would say. So that's in a gist what we're doing.
So but I guess every company has its own ICP. Could you describe it or define it? What is the ideal customer profile for which your solution might be the best solution?
I mean, that's a loaded question, I think, particularly for TheyDo, because we are a very horizontal platform. Sometimes it has pros and it also has cons. So like, we have sold historically across the board to like many different industries, like pharma, automobile, retail, manufacturing, also some software. So we don't have like a sweet spot in terms of like, hey, a company would be doing this or this and that. But there are certain sort of size parameters that we use. For example, like usually more than 1,000 employees, because the complexity between as you have more people and more business units and more subsidiaries, like becomes more and more complex to like surface those insights. So that's one thing that usually resonates quite well. And then besides that, in terms of, I would say, perhaps you could argue we're more about the traditional industries than the more modern industries, because obviously on average, the more old school, the older the company, the more traditional the company, the bigger the inefficiencies that you can find, right? So the more there's a need for like, let's mine the data, let's break the silos, let's align towards a common strategy, and let's make that shareable. So we found sort of, maybe perhaps better traction there than perhaps the up and coming wave of business 3.0 startups or scale-ups. But we're not limited to that. We're definitely, I think in general, there definitely needs to be a signaling or a buy-in that the company is quite focused, of course, on like customer-centric operations, and CX UX needs to be pretty much a strong department, because usually that's not necessarily correlated, but usually they go together in a way. Like if there is a lot of emphasis on making products pretty, making your front end your pretty, and your endpoints attractive and easy to use, there usually is a concern about the customer having a good time, having a good experience. So that usually is a good indicator for us, and even better if there's like a customer journey function in itself. Some companies have it, not a lot, but like they might have customer journey directors or customer experience directors, and you can name it in different ways. But if there's someone with a title journey in the company, that's obviously a very positive thing for us, because usually they get it quite quickly.
And is there any other way to automatically get these signals that the company is focused on pretty UX or a good customer journey, just by, for example, providing the website to an AI and let it rank how pretty it is?
Yeah, I mean, well, that's maybe one strategy, but I think like that's a little trickier to know, because like the website is only one of the endpoints that you would look at, right? So that's obviously maybe the easier, the top level one. But when it comes to like prospecting and kind of like probing for the maturity of the customer journey focus, let's say in a company, it's a tricky one. A lot of it has to do with the kind of job titles that you can find in them. So it's a lot about mapping the organization, mapping the account, understanding like, hey, there's this function, this department that seems to be quite aligned with this. Maybe go into the persona, the prospect itself, see if they're engaging with communities that we know are around customer journeys, around customer experience. Have they attended any conference we've gone to? So it's more of a I guess topic level interest of the personas, of the sales personas that we're attacking, and whether also that correlates with the top down push of the business of like, hey, we want to really want to focus on this. So I think it's more of a, I would say, deeper research. But yeah, I think obviously a good start is usually if you can look at someone's mobile app, website, the language they use, the style of their posting and stuff like that. You can probably infer whether there is a strong focus on customer. Like for example, you look for example at Revolut, right? And that's like a great example, right? The app is super clean, super well built, and it's designed for a B2C use case that's really strong. So the more you can resemble that kind of customer first mentality in B2B context, that's usually a positive sign.
Yeah, Revolut, very good example, because I see almost every day their current advertisement in Germany where Mario Götze, the German football or national football player, who basically scored the goal against Argentina to make the German world champion.
I know him.
Very, very great company, and as you mentioned, UX-wise as well. Nico, now you mentioned one important thing, that you are tackling companies horizontally. So you're not you're not focusing on one specific industry, but it can be multiple ones. So can you maybe walk us through the sales process? So what does a sales process look like at TheyDo if you're tackling multiple industries, multiple companies?
Yeah, so I mean, I feel like every company we've gone through a lot of pivots, right? So things change kind of all the time, but we are and any enterprise sort of sales process will have a pretty, like I would say, stringent qualification, right? So we do have a decent amount of inbound interest coming into our website. We still today have a free tool, so we allow access to a free tool that might change in the coming weeks or so. But yeah, we still allow people to just try out the product, and that brings in some people who are interesting to us from a sales perspective, and some people who are not. Like for example, we get a lot of students, a lot of people just checking around. Filtering that inbound, it's one sort of big focus for us to understand: are we aligning our product marketing, our product messaging to reach the people that we want to to be able to convert to core users, to power users that will hopefully become like champions in the sales process, and bring this bottom up to their managers and the manager of the managers, because in the end we're talking about big companies. So usually people who are signing up to try a free product don't necessarily are the buyer, right? So then you need to go from the user to the buyer and kind of close that chasm, let's say. So that's one thing, and then the other thing is obviously we do also have I would say quite developed now outbound motion as well. And the thing about our market is that it does require a little bit of education still. Like it's not like you're selling a CRM or expense management solution where you can really feel the pain, and it's really intuitive to understand, hey, this is the ROI, this is what the platform does. A lot of people are not necessarily looking exactly for customer journey management platform, because it's still we want it to be a growing term and sort of like a new category, right? So we're trying to creating that category, and that usually requires a little more of an outbound push to get people aware of what we're selling, kind of the benefits that we give, and so on. So we do have verticalized content, I would say, and we provide some some marketing air coverage around certain industry use cases to make it easier to get traction, qualified traction around those. That usually has worked well in the past. And the way you would do it is hey, you find success in one particular vertical and you start sort of multi-threading into, hey, I don't know, Coca-Cola use this, so you go to Pepsi and you go hey, Coca-Cola is using us and they're doing this, you should just check it out. And usually that social proof is also quite attractive for companies, right? So that's one thing we've tried a bit on the outbound front. But yeah, I think right now it's your traditional sort of enterprise sales motion, BDR to AE handover, particularly revolutionary, but we're trying to be creative around the way we marry together inbound and outbound in that sense.
So to my understanding, part of your revenue progress or revenue process is not product-led growth, but more product-led land, so that your product lands in the company and then can evolve by creating champions. Is that also reflected by your marketing? So do you target users in your marketing or administrators, the buyers?
So, I mean, it's a good question, because I don't know if I would agree that we're still sort of product first. I think that right now, the more you want to go up market and the more you want to land bigger deals, the more you need a bit of a sales push, perhaps even a sales first approach, because as you climb towards the the enterprise side of things, the gap between, or the distance between the user and the buyer is just too large. to like enable a buyer to come in and like, maybe if you wait a year and a half and 2 years, maybe naturally it will progress towards, hey, now 50% of our lower level users are using this tool. What is this? And then at some point the manager will be like, okay, let's just buy it and make it a thing, right? So like obviously we will be involved in helping that happen from the sales side. But like I'm guessing if you're able to market and land, let's say from a marketing perspective, a little bit above that ladder, so like more of a mid market, mid level, seniority persona, you can probably, or we've seen, you can shorten that sales cycle quite a bit. So I would say right now we don't necessarily market to the power user when it comes to like sales marketing communication. But the product marketing probably is still a little tailored towards the end user. But it's something that we're actually trying to solve. We're trying to make it so that when you land on our website, you don't necessarily feel like, oh, this is something that only my junior people will be using. You kind of want to see the benefit from a manager / team leader department perspective, which is really the powerful part about the tool, in all honesty, because it's the roll up of the opportunities and the insights that you mine from these inputs, that as a manager, as a CEO, as a VP, you can then say, okay, what are my biggest opportunities to improve my negative customer experience or customer frustration in, I don't know, X business unit, X division in each country, right? And you can kind of get to that level of granularity. It takes some work to make that happen, but that's a promise that I think it's what we're trying to really position from a marketing perspective.
Makes sense, especially since it rolls up to the decision maker.
Exactly.
Nico, you mentioned that you're now having more or less like an enterprise sales motion, and you also mentioned that you like to work with AI. So maybe you can name some use cases. Are there some use cases where you support the sales team AI-based, like with AI agents? And what's very interesting to hear for our listeners always, which use cases are out there and how do you solve them with the help of AI?
Yeah. So we've done recently a big push towards really making AI a thing, like push AI adoption around the company. And I think a lot of the newer, the forward thinking companies are doing the same, like weekly AI calls where we're like, hey, this is some AI use cases that different teams are doing. How can we sort of emulate that to make our day-to-day more productive? And in terms of, I would say, like cross-functional, like company level builds that we've done, we've used N8N quite a lot for like workflow automation, calling agents, from whatever model makes more sense to, like, for example, suggest copy for sales outreach, depending on, for example, enriched person information. So, you get a lead in, email, name, whatever, maybe you get a LinkedIn profile. We also use like the traditional enrichment tools, like, the ZoomInfos of the world and so on, which are, the more expensive enterprise side tools, which arguably they might not be needed too much in the future if this keeps evolving like this. But you get the usual email, LinkedIn, etc., and then you can use AI to say, okay, find me maybe, or give me a summary of the latest 3-4 posts that this person had on LinkedIn that relate to, for example, customer journeys, right? So then you'll see, okay, I see this person is experiencing pain around A, B, C, D. Now craft an email or an email suggestion around these topics, and sort of frame TheyDo value proposition or our product in that context. And then you can push that obviously within AI directly, for example, to an outreach sequence or a sales engagement sequence, sales, whatever, right? So then you, as a rep, you can already see, okay, out of all the leads that I've qualified, because obviously we do want qualification to still be a human-led interaction, because obviously, it's not so trivial. But once we've labeled a lead as, hey, we want to actually talk to these people, then they can obviously, for example, choose, I want to add them to whatever cadence, right? You can either say you want to have some human validation and supervision around where I'm going to assign or where I'm going to route these people, or you can also go full AI and say, let's just AI figure it out. And, you can kind of land somewhere in that spectrum. We're not in the fully automated side yet. We're kind of more like on the human-led part of things. But even if you do assign, to whatever sequence or messaging you want to give to that person, you can have an AI suggest an initial copy and save some time around just, correcting, amending, and then just, sending. So I think it's about minimizing those really repetitive tasks that are annoying. And obviously you can do so faster and better with the extra insight that, for example, an AI can produce. And that's one example. But then we have we're using obviously ChatGPT quite a lot. We created custom GPTs that understand with sort of proprietary material about like sales decks we've built and POV documents that we've created, qualification over documents that we've produced in house, so the customer GPT really understands TheyDo, and then you can sort of use it as a personal assistant almost, in like, hey, what do you think about this lead? Like, is that a fit for us or not? Or I don't know, like, what do you think is missing on this sales process? Looking at these transcripts from Otter, Gong, whatever, like call transcript solutions, surface, the more interesting pain points, friction points, so we can bring it up on the next call. So there's a lot of different use cases that I think are still running a little bit like independently of each other. We're still in the exploration phase, but at some point, I think there's definitely a need or a want to make it a more structured delivery.
And does this AI setting, which boosts efficiency among the entire team, but especially the revenue team, impact your hiring strategy when you look at new sales positions?
So far, I don't think it has directly impacted our sort of like a headcount plan, to be honest. We do, the way we think about it is like, hey, we can probably, obviously we can make the most, or we can make more out of every headcount in terms of productivity. I think it's perhaps more about outcome than productivity nowadays, right? It's not about like how can we make a human more effective, but it's more about like how can we just make the company as a whole more effective, more produce more output, whether that is from human or superhuman or something different, right? So I think like the whole question sort of changes. But it hasn't really impacted directly, I think. I think as we start to really implement these things in a more structured way, and we start optimizing, cleaning and stuff, it might. I guess we'll have to see the performance of automation versus performance of humans, which we're still in the early days to like really track and differentiate. But it is a possibility that it will definitely because I think also a lot of companies now are more focused on efficiency than they were before, which is healthy, I think, for the market, not only on growth, right? So obviously AI has a huge potential to make this much more to have much more leverage on that front. So I think it's something that we should definitely consider, and everyone should definitely consider, like, hey, what does AI mean, or what does this tell us about how many people we should be hiring, who should we be hiring, what kind of roles. One thing I will say though is that we're now asking for AI, like demonstrated AI proficiency in interviews. So if you want to join TheyDo, you need to have some sort of experience or exposure to AI that you can sort of talk about that you've done beyond asking ChatGPT what the weather is, right? So we're definitely having like much more of a systemized approach to that.
That's very interesting. I think you're the first one that has ever mentioned this. I think TheyDo is on a good path towards the new era of AI. Talking about maybe also the RevOps role, Nico, because all of our listeners, they might be curious to understand the role a bit better. So could you maybe walk us through what a week typically looks like for you for RevOps?
Yeah. I mean, it's a good question. I mean, again, I think it really depends on what RevOps means for where you're working, where you're at. The way I see it, the way I like to structure it, and how I want to be involved is, as I mentioned, kind of like the central piece between like all these GTM departments, right? So it's like, hey, from the moment the lead comes in or the lead is captured, or even before, depending on how marketing oriented you might be, to the moment the cash is collected from the contract that was signed, like that whole process should be optimized by revenue operations. It all involves revenue and operations, right? So it's the same thing. And then depending on kind of like where your background comes from, you can basically land in RevOps from different track records, let's say, you could say, or backgrounds. So for example, I come from finance, right? So for me, it just makes sense that I'm, I guess, a little bit more financial when it comes to revenue operations. So like the quick wins that I sort of built from the beginning were, hey, how do we, for example, make sure that we can recognize revenue very, very correctly and to the cent, and make so in a quick way, in a quick sort of self-serve way. So that that's number one. How can we obviously enable, for example, tracking for renewals and working for expansions and understanding the health of the pipeline coverage that we're going to have. So it's a lot about modeling and systemizing that approach. So like obviously you can run it on spreadsheets, and a lot of companies will start there, right? Like we have a spreadsheet for forecast, a spreadsheet for renewals, a spreadsheet for whatever, a spreadsheet for this, spreadsheet for the P&L, and a spreadsheet for the ARR and whatever, right? And then you're trying to pull this all together. Then there's systems that you can use to obviously sort of merge this and make it more efficient. But at the end of the day, a lot of it is just about understanding the flow of data internally in the company and understanding where should it start, where should it end, who should have access to what, how should this be labeled, how should this be understood as a company. So that sort of data strategy, data architecture almost, which I did not know before before I moved to Rev, was something that I had to learn along the way, and I think it's probably the most valuable part of or the quickest win, I guess, when it comes to Revs. So a lot of my, I guess, current week is a lot around talking with VP of sales, VP of marketing, head of customer success, and understanding kind of like, hey, what are the things that are working for, like, in terms of like progressing our deals, how are we looking for coverage this quarter versus coverage next quarter, where is our pipeline coming from, what campaigns are working on the marketing front versus which ones are not, where should we allocate more money. So it's a lot about the strategy part of things, but I can now focus on the strategy a little more once you've set the foundations, as I mentioned. Right? So the beginning is inevitably a lot of cleaning, a lot of labeling, a lot of merging things together, sending things from one system to another, and building the intelligence on top of all that sort of shared or data lake, if you will, like unified data lake of a company. So until we achieve that, the first maybe 90 or 120 days of your RevOps function, if it's especially a new one, is going to be around that, and then you can start sort of evolving from there to like the more higher level stuff around predicting, scoring, qualifying, and building sort of like documenting or building the processes around how to do it as well. So not only do you have to build it, but you have to make sure that people understand it and that people kind of know how to work or what to tweak. So yeah, I mean, we can spend hours talking about exactly like all that involves, but yeah, that's kind of like the overall picture.
And you mentioned that most of the RevOps tasks start in a spreadsheet and then evolve from there. Out of experience, commissions is also a topic that really likes to be in spreadsheets. So just a question out of curiosity, is it with your company that TheyDo also in spreadsheets? And more general, how do you use commissions in your revenue strategy?
Yeah, so indeed, we did start with spreadsheets for commission plans. Now we actually use software for it. I won't say the name, but you guys know it probably. Yeah, we now have a tool for it, and it's been definitely a massive efficiency gain for us, because obviously as you evolve and you mature as a company, your complaints become much more complex, right? So then you have to not only break it down in different components that stick to each other and break down your total compensation in different sub goals and whatnot, but also you were dealing with different currencies, you're dealing with different markets, you're dealing with different there's a lot more complexity around it, and you also have to be lean and I guess lean enough and quick enough, nimble enough to able to make changes on the fly, right? So we want to introduce a spiff, right? So it's going to be a temporary spiff. It's going to be for this quarter only. How can we roll it out the quickest, right? And obviously these tools allow you to make a one-click change, ideally, or a couple of click change to then have it all together, read from your CRM and calculate, okay, this is what the actual attainment looks like against your target, and this is how much you need to be paid this month versus whatever. And measure also, as you guys know, measure your performance as a rep against others and make it all very, very seamless. And I'm guessing that's a question, obviously, for you guys as you're more in this market. But usually I think that the status quo of compensation management solutions is you sell it to finance, sell it to ops, right? Because they're the ones who are in charge of building the plans. You make sure that their department users understand how to use your tool, and they do that, they implement it, they roll it out. And I think in the best case scenario, most of the time, your reps maybe check it once a month at the end of the month, right? They're like, hey, I just want to see how I did, and if there's anything that's wrong, anything that's missing based on what I think I should be making. But there's definitely a lot of opportunity, I think, to making it much more of a real-time feedback loop, right? Hey, I want to check it ideally I guess it's arguable whether there's a need for that or not. Maybe you don't need your reps checking it every day. Maybe you do. Maybe you don't. I guess it depends also on your sales strategy. If it's field sales versus B2B SaaS and you're working from an office, I guess it's a lot of variables. But yeah, I guess I'm going on a tangent here. But yeah, I think there's a lot of from a finance roles perspective, there's definitely a lot of time saving. And from personal experience at TheyDo, we don't have that engagement on the end user front, perhaps that I think could make it more attractive. But it's still a critical tool for us just on the time saving kind of aspect of things.
Yeah, very interesting to hear. I guess it's also depending on the sales motion. So, for example, if you're in an enterprise kind of sales process, then of course the touch points with such a software might be lower than, let's say, high frequency sales like door-to-door field sales. So do you agree with this, or Do you see it completely different?
No, for sure. I mean, I think that that's definitely fundamentally two different use cases, right? And of course, like, you guys know the market better than I do, but like, there's a decent amount of players right out there doing this, and like, I feel like each of them is trying to position themselves a little bit more towards, oh, we serve traditional industries versus we do B2B SaaS sales versus we do big enterprise versus we do small business versus we do field sales versus online sales or whatever, right? And all those things like really are going to influence the product roadmap, right? Like in terms of like, hey, what are the features that people are requesting? Like, do we need forecasting in there? Do we not, for example? Do we need, I don't know, cash settlement information in there? Do we need leadership dashboards in there? Do we want even dashboard? Do we want to just run on top of a BI or whatever, right? So those are, I mean, questions that you probably are dealing with a lot more than I do, but I can definitely see, because I'm the buyer of these tools and I get a lot of inbound, right? I know how people are trying to position each other, and I think it's interesting.
Is there any most trickiest thing when you think of commissions?
That's a good question. I think, well, I guess let me think about it for a second, because I have some ideas.
Be also a difficult question since you have moved away from spreadsheets and now have a solution in place.
Yeah. I mean, when I'm thinking about kind of like what do we like to improve in our current solution, well, one of the things is definitely the UX, but that's like an overall thing. When it comes to building the plans, I think it's pretty much intuitive, but there are certain things that, for example, one thing I'll mention is like it would be great to have like currency conversion built in, because right now, for example, that's not something that it's not a huge pain for us because we don't deal with like 25 different countries where we're hiring, but we have 3, 4, 5 different currencies we're dealing with when it comes to payouts. That's not part of like a native embedded in the tool, so we actually need to go and check like an external converter that we kind of all agree, hey, we're going to use this one for anything, and then we go convert manually and be like, okay, now if we offered X amount of dollars, then that means whatever whatever currency we're dealing with, pounds, etc. And we need to sort of keep that fresh, because obviously now, as you know, the dollar is tanking a little bit. So like, if you're closing contracts in dollars, it's worth less euros 2 months after, right, nowadays.
Should the time step for the currency conversion be when the payout is due or when the deal actually closed?
It's a good question. I mean, I guess you could do it either way. I think about it more like when the deal closes, but we actually do payout upon collection in TheyDo. So the moment you actually get paid out could be 2-3 months after you close the deal, depending on how quickly we can get the invoice. And I think that's how I don't know how often you've seen that in customers you've talked to, but it has worked quite well for us, because obviously you want to have that, I guess, meeting the game for the AEs in particular to actually chase invoices. Because otherwise it'll just be like, hey, we've closed the deal, move away, go on the next one, and like it's really easy for things to fall through. Right? I mean, to your point, probably a conversation to have for us internally whether we want to do that at payout or at attainment, let's say. But for now, we're mostly on attainment.
Okay. Yeah, so coming to the end of this podcast, we usually play a game with our guests, which is an either-or game. So we ask a either-or question, and you can decide which fits best your ideas. And Alex, you can open the stage.
Yeah, so these questions revolve all around the topic of commissions. And the first one is, would you go for a fixed income or commission-based?
Personally, as a rep,
your personal opinion.
Yeah, commission-based.
Okay. And would it be a revenue share of a closed deal, or would you perform on a target and earn up on your target attainment?
That's a good question. I mean, if you ask me as the one that needs to pay out, I would prefer the relative performance to target. But I think that as AEs, like the industry standard is just to take real on the deal, and that's just easier to understand. So I guess it depends on who's answering. But from an operational perspective, I think the fairest and the easiest is the performance to target option.
I will soon release a commission insight report on the SaaS industry where exactly this question is answered. So stay tuned.
Okay. Happy to read that.
Yeah, will be coming out in the next 2 weeks, I guess, on LinkedIn. And then the third question, setting a cliff, like a minimum threshold to achieve to be eligible to earn commissions, or no cliff.
I think no cliff, but I think there's like a midpoint in that. I think, for example, in TheyDo we unlock accelerators after at a given cliff, for example. So you get your base component, like regardless, but until you're over X percentage of attainment, we don't kicking the accelerators. So at least there's some sort of assurance there.
So hearing of accelerators leads to the next question. When unlocking the accelerator, is there any cap or would it be uncapped?
You mean now, or which one will I prefer?
Which one you prefer?
I think uncapped. I mean, if you're setting your targets correctly, then there's no reason why you should be capping, right? I mean, if you're hugely undersetting, right, then of course you can be in trouble. But I think there's no real positive incentive in capping performance of your reps. So yeah, I think I'll go no cap.
All right, and there's one thing that rhymes on cap. It's a wrap. So these were the last words of this episode. Nico, thanks so much for being the guest today, sharing insights on how you deal with AI already in your RevOps role. That TheyDo is one of the first companies, or one of the companies that actually adopted and adapted to AI. And your view on commission was also very insightful. So thank you for being the guest today.
Of course, my pleasure, guys. Thank you for having me.